first name.
First name is enough. Okay. Is there more?
No.
That's the last one? Okay.
Om Sahanavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is an important chapter and also something that is not properly understood many times. It can be confusing because it brings in a lot of terminology that we have often heard but not necessarily understood in the way that the tradition, the teachers in the tradition, Adi Shankara onwards, would like us to comprehend. There are a number of terms that appear again and again. Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti, Jnanam, Saguna Brahma, Brahman with attributes. What is Brahman with attributes?
Ishvara.
Or you. But here in this case, Ishvara. And Nirguna Brahma, Brahman which is without attributes. All these, it's like Bhel Puri. Bhel Puri? It's a particular, you put everything except the kitchen sink in it. You put a little bit of rice and a little bit of some crunch, that puffed rice, little bit of crunchy things, little bit of soft vegetables like boiled potatoes, and little sour, little sweet, little hot, everything. And then it becomes a dish. So like that, the 12th chapter has a little bit of everything in it. And if it's not understood properly, instead of eradicating the confusion from the mind, what it does is to further make the confusion, dhrida. Dhrida means what? Extremely solid. So what is confusion? What is solid? The confusion is solid. One is solidly sitting in the confusion because these are not understood. And like I said yesterday, it's a very nice compliment to some of the other things that we are studying, which will doubtless raise a lot of questions. And so that is why we are going to study this particular chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The context is very simple. The context is just that Arjuna continues to be confused. That is the context. There is no other context. If Arjuna already was, had clarity about himself as a result of the teaching, and the teaching, mind you, has already been continuing for how long? 11 chapters. The teaching has already, it's not that this is the second chapter, but it may well be, because the same question that arose in Arjuna's mind at the beginning, at the end of the beginning of the second chapter, continues in the same way. The only thing is he becomes more clever in how to phrase that question. Like a child, becomes very innovative. And what is that question that he wants to ask, and he cannot get his mind, sometimes when there are repeated questions, repeated or a recurring question, sometimes the people will have the same question, and I have encountered it myself. Each time I visit a place, the person asks the same person asks the same question. It's not a different person asks, it's the same person. So that shows that there is a certain kind of a veil which is refusing to be lifted, because the answer is being given not once but repeatedly. And if the question still persists, that means there is something that is not letting one see. There is some block, some fear, something that is not allowing one to enjoy the question, enjoy the answer that was given. Or the person has already made up their mind about what the answer should be, and they are repeatedly asking the question to confirm that particular answer where in their own head. And both of these are true for Arjuna. And as you know, the Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between who?
Krishna.
Yeah, not Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. Between Bhagavan Krishna and Arjuna. Arjuna is a jiva. Jiva means the one who is struggling, vulnerable, feeling alienated. These are the three characteristics of someone called jiva. Struggling, vulnerable, and feeling disconnected, alienated from what? From oneself, from everything else. If one is alienated from oneself, of course one is alienated from everything else. No doubt. This is, this is the student of Lord Krishna here. And he was not particularly interested in either removing this confusion or this alienation. He thought of himself as a great warrior and a protector of people. And so he went about doing his job. He was not particularly interested in self-knowledge. Although he had the opportunity to gain this knowledge. Why? Because he was in the forest, having lost the kingdom to the usurpers. The usurpers banished him and his brothers to the forest for 12 years. In that he could have studied the 12 chapters Gita, but no. Krishna was there. A lot of other sadhus, means mendicants, teachers, renunciants were in the forest. That is who he would have met. He could have asked anyone for that knowledge and said, it's so nice here, the birds are chirping, it's very peaceful, I like this ashram and I think I'm just going to stay here, forget the kingdom. Who wants this headache of managing this big kingdom and trying to keep it protected? Did he say that? No. He was very bloodthirsty. In the whole time he was just chafing at the bit like the horse and wanting to make a push for the war. The war was unavoidable and he was getting ready. He was stockpiling ammunition, keeping the powder dry as it were, and in those days there were mantra-powered missiles. They make the smart bombs look dumb. You know what a mantra-powered missile is? On that arrow, the name of the target is already written, figuratively speaking. So you chant the mantra to keep the arrow potentized. And when the time comes, even if you are a bad shot and you throw the arrow somewhere else, it will roam around and find the mark because you've been chanting the mantra. It's a mantra-powered missile. So if Arjuna was given to meditation, which is the subject of this chapter, he was only meditating on those arrows and the mantra-powered missiles, taking the names of all those, what are those called? Those antagonistic people that had disrespected his wife by attempting to disrobe her in public as a result of some wager, and he was just so angry that this is all he could think about for the 12 years. And then confronted with the battlefield, what happened? He was confronted with his elders. And this is where the downfall is. Because in India, the elders are seen as those deserving respect. Because they are older to you, they have more experience, they have more knowledge, this is who they are, and so the younger ones respect the elders. Now, but these kinds of elders who are standing on the wrong side, who have joined the side of the usurpers, the grandfather, the uncle, the teacher, everybody is on the side of that which is adharma, wrongdoing. But Arjuna cannot get past the form to see the content of what this is all about. He's stuck in the form. Oh, these are respectful people. One form he's stuck in. And killing of elders is wrong. Another form. And so here I'm killing not only elders but respected elders and teachers, and so that has become a big block to anything. And then when you don't like what you have to do, the orange robes start looking very nice. Yeah. When the going gets tough, what happens? What happens?
Tough get going.
Yeah,
Really going.
the so-called tough. They are not really tough. If they were really tough, they would have stayed and, faced the situation. But the so-called tough people get going. So, this is what happened to Arjuna. And suddenly he became a pacifist. He joined the Peace Corps. He wanted to bring about social change. He wanted to, stop, stockpiling of armaments. He was against arming. He was against mantra-powered missiles. He said, what is the use of this war? How terrible this all is, and why we have to do this. It's different. A similar epiphany, another emperor in the tradition had a long time ago, called Ashoka. And Ashoka also fought a war. And he cried at the end of the war, seeing the bodies on the ground and everything. Similar thing. He converted to Buddhism and disbanded the army, which was not a very clever thing to do, as hindsight and history shows us. But never mind, this is not a history lesson. I'm just pointing out that, in war and battles are difficult times, because they bring out the jivatvam, that vulnerability, even more, because you are surrounded by people you know and people you are supposed to fight, and then at one level you recognize that they are not that different from you. They are same as you, and here you are fighting them, and in killing them, divesting their families of the father figure, of a husband, of a father, all this, and you can see that. And then it's just a matter of time whether you are going to get killed and perish, or they are going to perish in this battle. And the battlefield always brings out the philosopher in oneself. Or any kind of a war, any kind of a, when confronted with death, everybody becomes extremely philosophical. Same thing happened to Arjuna. What is the use of these killing fields? What is the use of destroying all these people? What is the use of, and why are we destroying it? For the sake of the kingdom. What is the use of the kingdom? Oh, kingdom is to be enjoyed. When the people that we want to enjoy the kingdom with are all gone because they are standing opposed to us, our cousins, our uncles, our brothers, our grandfather, our teacher. Without them, how are we going to enjoy anything? This is what his lament. This was the first chapter. And then suddenly he thought the best way out is to leave the war when it had just begun. Not after victory was declared, not before the war was declared. He waited for the war to be declared, had, chicken-heartedness. He had a full-fledged panic attack at the end of chapter 1. he said, my hands are slipping, my hands are perspiring. He said that my bow is slipping from the hand because the hands are full of sweat. And I'm feeling feverish, my body is burning up, my heart is beating wildly. I hear a knocking sound when there is no door, so I conclude it must be the knees. And I am having a lot of trouble concentrating, my mind is having brain fog. He says all these things. And then he also says that I have started to look at everything and I start looking for inauspicious omens. I've started to see omens because this is another jiva, what is that? Jivaness. When one is feeling vulnerable, one looks at everything as some kind of a sign from above, below, on the sides, whatever it is, from Ishvara. And and Arjuna also did that. Like this happens to everybody. There's a black cat living next door. Every time it comes and rubs up against your leg, maybe it's your own black cat. And then on the day you have a make or break interview at the job, you have to get this job, you're really wanting this, and it's the interview because it's going to decide your life's goals and success and all these things. And then what happens? The cat crosses the path. Every day it has crossed. At that time nothing happened. Today it crosses and suddenly you become cross. You become cross. And what is the meaning of that? The meaning is that when one is vulnerable, one is keeping on looking for any kind of a approval from the universe. And in fact, one is looking for disapproval also because one is afraid. And when you're afraid, like the children before they go to bed, just check underneath the bed, correct? Yeah, because of that fear. They might expect something there to jump out. And so too Arjuna is seeing omens all over. And what kind of omen? Inauspicious omens. Viparitani nimittani pashyami Keshava, he says this. Opposite to auspicious omens, inauspicious omens I am seeing. Na shaknomi avasthatum. I am not able to hold my mind. Bhramativa me manaha. My mind is wandering, confused. I am having fog and confusion. And then he says, when nothing else works, this is, that's why we love Arjuna so much, because he's like everyone. He's like all the people who study Vedanta. It's beautiful. And then when nothing else works, he says to Krishna in the middle of the battlefield, I am totally helpless. I am at odds with what is happening. Please help me. And do what? Help me to see where is it that I am going wrong? What is it that I need to know? Why do I feel this so dejected that I cannot even fight? Because, Lord Krishna says, come on, this is not the time for a spiritual sermon, get up. And he refuses to get up. He sits in the chariot, which is a big no-no. You're supposed to stand in the chariot majestically. You don't sit down. Because you're getting, you're not going for a joy ride. Then you can sit. This is a battle chariot. You're supposed to stand up. And so what happens? He is just devastated. And when nothing else works, people think, okay, maybe this 1 month course will help. Maybe the 12th chapter will help. Maybe something will help. Because nothing, we have tried everything and everything helps, but to a certain extent. Everything helps relatively, including the relatives. Relatives also help relatively. Nothing helps absolutely. And so when one is absolutely dejected, one starts to seek the absolute. This is the human condition. And so too in the middle of the raging war, he says, I am your student, please teach me. And Bhagavan Krishna doesn't have an obligation to teach him. He should have said, he could have said, what were you doing all these days? Eating bananas? What were you doing? You could have asked for this knowledge at any time. This is not the time for, Vedanta studies. Get up, fight. I'm not going to hear anything more. But because of his compassion, he doesn't do that. Right there in the raging battlefield, he starts to teach him. And this is very appropriate and also allegorical, because really speaking, when is the peaceful time for Vedanta study? Tell me. Answer is never. Right? And in fact, this is what the Bhajagovindam also laments. Bhajagovindam also says the same thing. What is the correct time to have Brahma Vidya, the knowledge of Brahman? Balastavat krida saktah. Somebody said you have to start young, because everybody feels, why didn't I attend these lectures earlier? Now, I can't even remember anything. Why didn't I meet the teacher earlier? Everybody thinks that. So then those who think that it should be at a young age, balavasthayam, in the childhood itself, one should be exposed to Brahman and Brahma Vidya. The Bhajagovindam says, Tavat, at that age, in that time, Balaha, the child, Krida asaktaha. Asaktaha, addicted to play. You try to bring a child and make it sit down for Vedanta classes, it will make you get up. It's not going to sit down, because that's not the age. It's very clear. And we should catch them at young age. And sometimes people tell me, why don't you make a college curriculum of Bhagavad Gita, all this? And all I have to say is, Tarunastavat taruni raktaha. Taruna means young person. So then, what is the young person addicted to? The Bhajagovindam says, the young person is addicted to another young person. That is what it is. They're always looking out to see who is interested in them. They are looking out to see who is looking at them, who is wanting me, and who is, giving me cards and presents. This is all they are interested in. How they appear to the world, and who has liked them on Facebook, and who has, all this is all it is. And they come to me also and say, can you please like me on Facebook? One college girl said that. I said, I can like you on your face. Why should I like you on Facebook? No, I want to count the likes. I want to increase the likes on Facebook. So this is the Taruna. Taruna is interested in Taruni. Taruni is interested in Taruna. And this is what it is. Okay, so then that means it is clear that you have to wait till retirement to study about Brahman, correct? To resolve the self-confusion that one is a mortal and one is getting vulnerable and hijacked from one's life, with every passing battlefield. So then one has to wait till one is an elder. Vriddhastavat chinta magnaha. Vriddha, Vriddha means older person. Bring the person into Vedanta class. Make them sit down. They can't sit down. They'll sit on the chair. Anyhow, so then what will happen? The mind will be disturbed. Disturbed by what? They have raised their children. Their children are married. They are okay. Why is the mind still disturbed? They are worrying about old age. How will I die? What's going to happen? These idiotic children that I have invested so much in, will they even come and take care of me? Will they even say, how are you? Will they come for Father's Day? Will they come for Mother's Day? At least once a year they'll come. They'll at least ask, where are you? What are you doing? And then more chinta. Chinta means this kind of worry. And what kind of other worries? What will happen after I go? What will happen to the business? What will happen to the money? What will happen to the children? Will they be able to honor the will and apportion the estate in particular ways that I have deemed? Or will they fight amongst themselves? This is the thing. And what kind of, and then there are certain, bodily worries are always there, and they increase with age. Wherever you put your mind on, there it hurts. Yatra yatra mano yati, tatra vyadhayah. Vyadhi means ailments. Actually, this is a play, because actually the correct statement is yatra yatra mano yati tatra tatra samadhayah. In fact, we'll be seeing this. Wherever the mind goes, there should be the contemplation. Like if you look at the tree, look upon the tree as Bhagavan and see the tree as non-separate from you and go immediately into meditation. This chapter only will tell later. Panchadashi will also tell this later. But here for the elderly person, what? Yatra yatra mano yati tatra tatra vyadhayah. Vyadhi means ailments. So wherever the mind falls on, whichever body part the mind falls on, it starts to hurt. You keep going, ow, ow, ow. You have to keep shifting the position. You can't stand, sit still. And then the Bhaja Govindam concludes with sadness. Pare Brahmani kopina lagna. So in Brahman, which is the truth of everything, no one is interested, no age is the correct age. Because the childhood is hijacked by play. The youth is hijacked by another youth. Old age is hijacked by worries. And then what is the correct age to study this? No correct age. Because at every age there is a battle. There is an internal raging battlefield of thoughts, ideas, conflicts, what to do, what not to do, how to behave, how not to behave, how should I go about life and how should I not, and how to, all these things. What is important, what is unimportant, these are the conflicts. Dharma, adharma, what is correct, what is right, versus what is the correct thing to do, versus what I really want to do, The correct thing to do is to respect the other person, but what I really want to do is, biff them on the head. This is what is the whole thing, this is the quandary, and in such a raging quandary of dharma and adharma, which is the metaphorical symbol of the battlefield, the teaching, of course, is the most appropriate time and place for the teaching, because in other words, Bhagavan Krishna establishes there is no appropriate age and no appropriate time for the teaching to happen. If you are waiting for the appropriate time, what is that? It's like waiting for something that never comes. That's what it is. Because there is no real correct time where everything will be over and everything will be wonderful and all is at peace. That time will never come. And so the teaching, proceeds because of this. And in the teaching, in the second chapter, the entire, in fact, in the second chapter, at the beginning of the second chapter, Bhagavan Krishna rescues Arjuna from wanting to renounce the world. Yeah. Krishna is wanting to go to Haridwar. Haridwar is a place where half the town is wearing orange. Yeah. Even people, selling in the clothes shop, they are all sadhus. Don't know how they are become businessmen, but never mind. That's the topic of another lecture, not this one. So then, I was shocked once I went to a dispensary. I had a cold and I needed some medicine, and then the sadhu was selling the medicine in the shop, in the little dispensary, pharmacy. So anyhow, Haridwar and Rishikesh are places near the Ganga where, this pursuit is taken seriously, and if you want to renounce, that's where you go. And from Kurukshetra, which is just on the outskirts of Delhi, to Haridwar is, you can, cover the journey in a day and a half. How? Paidal, by walk. You can go. And Arjuna, thinking this, says, it's better to go sit in Haridwar and it is better to live a life of alms. Alms who can take? Only brahmachari can take, or a sannyasi can take bhiksha. Other people are supposed to give alms, not receive alms. And so here again there is a confusion, because he says, instead of this, I want to give up the kingdom. Nothing feels good. I don't want the kingdom. I don't want the joy of having won this battle. I don't want victory. I don't want overlordship. Kinno rajyena govinda. Kim bhogaihi. Aishwaryena va. Overlordship, bhoga, all this I don't want. I just want to go and beg alms. It's better to become a sadhu. And Bhagavan Krishna brings him back and he says, that's not the life for you. Let me give you the vision of this teaching. And the vision of the Bhagavad Gita is the vision of the Vedic traditions. There is no difference. And the vision is that you think is subject to destruction is not subject to destruction. That is why you grieve needlessly. You are grieving over that, over which doesn't deserve to be grieved over. Because you think it is the end of these people, but really these people with these particular names and forms are not really absolutely there. They are there in the present, and on that transactional reality of them being those people who have transgressed dharma, they, their own karma is going to take them to an inglorious end, whether you actually kill them in the battle or not. So you are not the doer. Why are you taking on the doership? Why don't you see what you are doing as a conduit of Ishvara's principle of karma, Ishvara's law of karma? Why don't you just do that? Why don't you just do your job without worrying about the consequences of that? Because your job is to protect, your job is to fight, because you are a commander-in-chief. And you cannot desert the army once the war is declared. That is not the correct thing to do. So you really don't have any options. You may cover up the desertion with glorious names like I'm going to become a sadhu. But do you think they're going to respect you? They're going to spit on you when they come to Haridwar and say, oh, you are that Arjuna who ran away from the battle, leaving us in confusion. They are going to spit on you. They're not going to think of you. They are going to say things that I as Bhagavan should not say. He says that avachya vadamscha bahun vadishyanti tavahitaha nindantas-tava samarthyam tato dukkatarannu kim. He says, Bhagavan Krishna explains there is nothing worse than getting criticized by your so-called those who were your well-wishers. They will all criticize you. And what all they can say, they are going to say. That cannot be repeated in the Bhagavad Gita. It is so bad. So, avachya means unspeakable things they will say. And they will reduce you to a caricature. Not the Arjuna that you are. Not the example and the role model that you are known to be. They will reduce you to a total caricature. And is this what you want? Is this how you want others to remember you? And if not, you need to understand that you are neither you are neither killing nor are killed, and you are not the doer. And the Atma in you is the same as the Atma in all. And the battlefield is a play, you are playing a role, because the Atma is indestructible. It is, completely free of any kind of pain, sorrow, affliction, grief, and that is what you are. The whole vision was given. And the way of life that is conducive to understanding this vision, called Karma Yoga, was also given. What is Karma Yoga? Don't think of yourself as the doer. We talked about the doership a lot this morning. Don't think of yourself as the doer. Bring an intermediary to attribute consciously the doership. And who is that intermediary? None other than Bhagavan. Bring Bhagavan and Ishvara, attribute the doership to Ishvara. And if the doership belongs to Ishvara, the fruits of the action reside also where the doer of doer resides. And so the fruits of the action, receive them as prasada from Ishvara. And in this way, you will be safe, because you will not consider yourself an agent of the action. So, karma yogi bhava. Yogi bhava Arjuna, he was told. And then what? The third chapter should not even have come, because everything is complete. The Gita should have been a concise text of 2 chapters. But the third chapter comes, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth, and so on, because in the third chapter begins with a question. Here is what I mean by the recurrent question. The recurrent question. What is that? He says, Jyayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhir janardana तत्किं कर्मणि घोरे मां नियोजयसि केशव व्यामिश्रेणेव वाक्येन बुद्धिं मोहयसीव मे तदेकं वद निश्चित्य येन श्रेयोऽहम् आप्नुयाम्. He says, look, you praised the Jnani, the sannyasi, you praised the renunciant in the second chapter, and you praised knowledge as a whole. And here, so if knowledge liberates and karma binds, therefore do karma, you are telling me. And what kind of karma? Ghora karma, this terrorizing karma of, fighting a war. This is not some karma of, oh, sit down and make a mala. Arjuna. Today there is a special puja, so please make a mala for Bhagavan. That is very nice karma. Or go shopping and bring some flowers and bring some milk and yogurt for Abhisheka. Very nice karma. Correct? Yeah, you can do that all day long. Make some mala, make some sweets, all these things you can do. But here what kind of karma? Go fight and, kill all these wrongdoers. This is not there. This is not fair. And, and then you say knowledge liberates. And you say karma binds. And what kind of karma you have given me? You have given me the worst, the most heinous of karmas. And then you please tell me, what is it that I should do? I don't know what I should do. Ekam vada nishchitya. Give me one thing that I have to do. And it's from this question, it is very clear. And what is very clear? That Arjuna hasn't understood either karma yoga or sannyasa. What is karma yoga? It's a way of life. What is sannyasa? It is also a way of life. And they are both ways of life for a common end. What is that common end? The knowledge, moksha. To gain the knowledge, two particular committed lifestyles are given. To gain the knowledge, what do you have to do? You have to study. Who has to study? Everyone has to study. Karma yogi has to study. The jnani has to, the jnani becomes a jnani by studying. The sannyasi, if the sannyasi is not a jnani, also has to study. The renunciant has to study, and the karma yogi also has to study. The only difference is that the karma yogi is, doing other things, leading a life with other karma, but the karma is not taken as the author. It doesn't take oneself as the author of karma. And then what? And then the sannyasi is exclusively devoted to Brahma Vidya. That's all. One teaches, one studies, there is no other duties. The duties of all other things drop. All other social duties one is exempt from, because this knowledge is so highly valued that those who dare to take on this life are highly valued as well, because they represent the knowledge. So now what is the confusion in that? The confusion was rife in the mind of Arjuna, who confused the means for the end. He confused jnanam with sannyasi. He thought that moksha express is sannyasa and moksha milk run is karma yoga. Milk run means it's like a goods train. It stops at every stop. And in between the two stops also it stops. Because it should not get there to the end of the run before a certain time. So they have to keep stopping. So he said, which is better, the fast train or the slow train? Naturally the fast train, correct? And then so the same question, he hears the third chapter completely, he hears the fourth chapter, and then the same question comes up again in the fifth chapter. Sannyasam karmanam Krishna. It's recurrent, so that's why it has this tone, because he's getting annoyed. Punar yogam cha shamsasi. So here, out of the two, which is better? Karma yoga or sannyasa? Should I be a renunciant or should I do karma yoga? You are telling me to do karma yoga, but you are praising renunciation. And I also asked, remember, he recalls, that in the second chapter I said, Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha. How does the person of knowledge sit, stand, eat? How do they behave? And you said that they are like an ocean which is full and complete in itself, and the desires enter, as the desires rivers enter into the ocean, so too the desires enter into the jnani, the person of knowledge, without making any ripples. If one river doesn't join the ocean is not disappointed. If more rivers decide to join, the ocean is not elated. So too the desires have no bearing on the jnani. You yourself told all this. And now what? And now you are telling me, Uttishta, Yuddhaya Kritanishchaya. Come on, get up. Oh, the one you have, Vigatajvara, give up the fever that you are in. You are delirious. You're deliriously deluded. Give up the fever, get up and fight. Here you are giving mixed messages. So in the 5th chapter also he says. And Bhagavan very patiently says, Ekam Sankhyam cha Yogam cha. In fact, both of them are the same. If you are ready to be a sannyasi, you will not be sitting here asking all these questions. You would have become a sannyasi a long time ago. The fact that you are asking, why not sannyasa, why not sannyasa, why not sannyasa, shows that there is a certain confusion. Ekam Sankhyam, cha Yogam cha. Yat Sankhya means sannyasa. Yat Sankhya prapyate sthanam. That goal which is gained by a life of sannyasa. Tad yogaihi api abhigamyate. Even by yoga it is attained. Yoga here means karma yoga, not asanas. Okay, yeah. Even by karma yoga it is attained. Ekam sankhyam cha yogam cha. They are not different. They are the same. It is just whoever is ready to do whatever can do. Yaf pashyati sa pashyati. The seers of this know very well. Those who know this. And does he give up that question? No. He's quiet. Actually, we have to give him credit. Because he's quiet for chapter 5, chapter 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. For 6 chapters he is quiet. And in the 11th chapter he is spooked out. He is freaked out. Totally. He has a total freak out. A meltdown of sorts. Because, obviously it's very clear that if you want to see Bhagavan, that which is yourself, if you want to see that which is yourself, a certain kind of a separation has to take place between the seer and the seen, because you really can't see yourself. How can you see yourself? You are that which is not an object of sight. You are that which is the subject of sight. You can't hear yourself. Hearer is you, seer is you. And here he says, I have this desire from long standing. Please help, please, fulfill this desire. Show me your entire cosmic form. Bhagavan says, oh, no problem. Here you go. Then, you can't sit in the balcony seat and look at Bhagavan. Why? If you exclude yourself from Bhagavan, that is the cause of fear. Upanishad says this. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, Dvaitadhi bhayam bhavati. If there is even a slight separation, there is fear. And you can be afraid of cockroach, you can be afraid of Bhagavan also. Yeah. Cockroach is also Bhagavan, hard as it is to believe that. Yeah. So, you can be afraid of anything. If Bhagavan becomes an object, it becomes an object of fear. And so, Arjuna is totally frightened. And he sees Drona hanging between the 2 teeth of Bhagavan. And, and then Bhagavan's mouth is like a hot lava vacuum, vacuum of hot lava. One, hot air is catching all the wrongdoers, and, they are all going helplessly into this fiery mouth of the Lord. Just like even Arjuna says, just like patangaha, these, what are those things that go to the candle, the flame?
For
Moths. Like patanga means moth. These moths that are helplessly attracted to the candle and then flame. And then what do? They go there and commit suicide. And in drones, You can't tell them, come on, this is not good for you. They keep going and attracted, and so do all these wrongdoers. Arjuna sees are hopelessly and helplessly attracted to this fiery, place, and then they all are perishing. He sees all this and he is tremendously afraid. He does namaskar at least 51 times, and then he begs pardon. He says, I didn't know that you were this. I thought you were an uncle. I thought you were a fun person to hang out with. Remember all the things we did in childhood? We used to climb the neighbors' trees and steal their mangoes. I'm really sorry if I did or said something at that time. I'm sorry if I stole your share of the stolen mangoes. And then I'm sorry if I did this. And while eating, I might have stolen things from your plate. I'm sorry I did that. Please don't, unleash this terror that you are raining upon the whole wrongdoers on my wrongdoings. Please forgive me. And one more thing Arjuna manages to say, come back to that original form. I don't like this form at all. I don't like this form, And he's kind of jolted. And this is a good time, he's jolted. He's still kind of lost his bearings after the 12th chapter. He's still recovering his bearings. He's had a little bit of a shock. And from this place of shock, that same question that was asked in chapter 3 and chapter 5 has re-emerged in chapter 12. And he's clever. He doesn't ask it in the same way. Chapter 3 and chapter 5 also there is a difference. And chapter 12 again, as we will see, there is a difference. Is this the last time he asked this question? No, because chapter 18 he again asks it in yet another fashion. The question is the same. I think I've made a mistake in hearing you or listening to you. What you seem to be saying is you're praising the knowledge and the sannyasis who have taken sannyasa in order to study. That's why you take the sannyasa, in order to study. And therefore what? So therefore, this is in order to just free yourself of all the things, and that is what leads you to moksha faster. You don't have to be an idiot to know this, Arjuna thinks. And so therefore, I'm not really happy with the other, questions, other answers you have given. So Arjuna thinks to himself, I have to ask this question yet again. And so the 12th chapter begins with Arjuna's question. So please repeat after me. अथ द्वादशोऽध्यायः
अथ
अथ द्वादशोऽध्यायः अर्जुन उवाच एवं सततयुक्ता ये भक्तास्त्वां पर्युपासते ये चाप्यक्षरमव्यक्तम् तेषां के योगवित्तमाः Again. Arjuna uvacha evam satatayukta ye bhaktastvam paryupasate ye chapyaksharamayaktam tesham ke yogavittamaha So this is a question couched slightly differently, but you can see that it has the ingredients of the same thing that was said before. Arjuna uvacha. Arjuna said, when? A long time ago. What did he say? Evam. Evam means in this manner. Just look at the what's its name? The translation first. In this manner. Satata yuktaha means there are those devotees, bhaktaha, bhakta means devotees. Satata yuktaha means they are committed to you always. Bhaktaha tvam paryupasate, they meditate upon you. You means, doesn't mean Krishna here. What does you mean? Bhagavan. Yeah. So this is not any Krishna, this is not just Krishna here, this is Bhagavan. So evam, so the people who meditate upon you in this manner, who are devoted to you, that is one type of people. And then the second type of people are what? There are others. Ye cha api aksharam avyaktam paryupasate. There are those who seek you as one who is aksharam avyaktam. Aksharam not subject to decline. Avyaktam not an object of thought. Not an object, not available for objectification. So there are two kinds of people. What are these people? You know, let's get the distinctions very clearly. One who are devoted to you and worship you in all their undertakings. And worship you in all their undertakings means what? Whatever they do is worship. And also they worship you separately. They'll go to their puja room, they'll go to their temple, they'll go to their church, whatever it is, and they spend some time in worship. And not just one time worship, you know, kabhi kabhi worship. A person who is committed to worshipping you using various forms. And even those religions that say we don't have a form, they have, you know, forms. In Islam, a certain direction we face, they face the west, because the western direction is Mecca and that is seen as holy. And Christianity, the emblem of the cross is there, which is seen as the emblem of it, which stands as the symbol of sacrifice made by the avatara known as Jesus, an incarnation of God known as Jesus. That is what they believe. And so even though you say it is formless, still there are certain forms. So here is the worship with the help of forms. A worship, a ritual, a form of praying, where obviously there is a difference between what? The seeker and the sought, correct? You can't have a ritual for the formless. How are you going to do the ritual for the formless? How are you going to do Abhisheka? How are you going to, do all these things? Where are you going to show the incense, for the formless? It's not everywhere, really speaking. So here, the question is, there are those people who are very devoted to you all the time and who worship you with the help of forms. And then there are those other devotees who are also devotees. They are devoted to you slightly differently. They seek that which is imperishable. They go past the form, seek the imperishable, and then contemplate on what? On avyakta. Avyakta here means that which cannot be objectified. Contemplate upon you as the truth of themselves alone. Tesham ke, out of the two, who is the greatest yogi? So you see what he is really trying to say here? Who is the greatest yogi? Is it the one who worships you, in the traditional manner, as one does worship? There is a separation between the devotee and the object of devotion. Or the ones who look upon you as the very subject of devotion, the ones who contemplate upon you always as the truth of themselves. Which is better? Because he is having a plan here. Because he has already thought that Krishna will say, Bhagavan Krishna will say what? The latter of course is better, because that's the highest form of worship. He is hoping for that. But Krishna, of course, being Krishna, takes him on another spin in the answer. We will see that after a 10-minute break wherever you are. So just go, freshen up, stand up, jump around, do whatever you need to do. For 10 minutes we'll come back. Om. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.